Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Steve, and today I'm joined by Fred from HowtoDandD. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, David.
You know, uh, I reached out to you to come on and talk about gaming and YouTubing and whatever else happens to come up because Sadie Rogers was on. We were just talking about earlier, and she was like, she had recommended you, so I was like, sure. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, I've seen that name before. So I've seen you in the comments and in the chats, which I appreciate. Um, I don't absorb as much D&D YouTube content as we create. So I if either I was familiar and checked you out a while ago because you've been around for a while and forgot, which is very likely, because I have a terrible memory, or you just weren't on the radar. But you are on the radar now, sir. So thanks for coming on.
No problem. Yeah, you followed me many years ago on Twitter, and and I have lots of channels I'm subscribed to, but I don't have time to watch them all.
Yeah. So and also and the way the algorithm works, it's like we know if we haven't been to that channel and watched the video in a while, YouTube will not show it to you. So it's like we don't exist anymore. That is the plight of being a YouTube content creator.
Yep.
So what are you up to nowadays?
Well, I'm doing the best I can with our current fun time. Been very exciting. Pandemic's apparently a very exciting process, and we just had an earthquake yesterday. That was a couple of earthquakes actually, just off the coast of New Zealand. So everybody was freaking out, tidal waves, but no, just a few waves, and everything went fine. So yeah, I'm doing all right. It's it's a strange life. I kind of miss the life that I had,
Yeah,
but I can deal with it.
you guys are getting much closer to getting back to normal, right?
We're trying not to have any kind of significant issue within the community, so the border is very tight.
Yeah.
And we're currently in a lockdown 3. I think the worst one's a lockdown 4. So nobody can go to work apart from essential workers. So I'm still going to work because I work in the health sector, and that'll probably be for a while, since all the jobs that I had sort of lined up before disappeared with the pandemic. It's like God.
Yeah. Well, hopefully by the end of the year, like everyone will be vaccinated that's getting vaccinated, and we can get closer back to a semblance of normal. What? So when you game, do you usually game online or in person?
Normally, before the pandemic, it would be in person.
Yeah.
I'm not really fond of playing online, and in fact, it was a real struggle for my group, my home group, to actually play. And we were trying to sort of navigate through video chats. And I think we tried Google Hangouts, Google Meets, Skype.
Yeah.
We considered Discord, and I was like, oh, it's too complicated. Nobody's going to be able to figure it out. We tried Zoom, had less issues, I think, with Zoom than anything else. But I had to pay for it, because after 40 minutes, it's gone. It's like, I don't have to start the room every 40 minutes.
Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah. And then virtual tabletops. I did try to learn virtual tabletop, and I discovered that even though I might be able to figure it out, there's too much time. I couldn't run a game. I can't set it all up. So I just lay out my battle map in front of me on my desk and just get the webcam and point it down at the desk. And then we just do what we normally do when we were playing in person. And they just tell me where they want their miniatures to go.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's what Ted's doing. He sets up a second webcam,
Hmm.
and and has an area set up for his terrain and the minis and stuff, and also like he likes building terrain and painting minis and stuff like that. So that's kind of his jam anyway. So I like our group has always been like a mix of theater of the mind and miniatures, where we'll like break out the miniatures and set something up for a more complex scene or combat. But for the most part, it's theater of the mind. So that part isn't so bad for us. but I think Ted has gotten more and more into crafting, and like if you do that, you're gonna want to put out the cool stuff you made, and also the group starts getting spoiled too. Uh, and I'm like, Ted, you jerk, you're making me look bad here. They come to your game, you got all this fancy stuff.
Yeah, I use a mixture too of miniatures and theatre of the mind. So I use theatre of the mind when it's really simple combat,
Yeah,
or I'm just too damn lazy to do anything else and I
yeah,
can't be
yeah.
bothered. Just depends on my current mood as to what I'll do. But some of my players really struggle with doing theatre of the mind,
Yeah.
and so I still have the battle map there to make them feel like they are at least sort of kind of connected.
Sly Flourish put out some great like it's like a 1 or 2 page guidelines for running theater of the mind style combats and stuff that I found pretty helpful. We probably did a video about it way back when. Um,
Yep.
and I find too like if you're running theater of the mind, as long as you're kind of like lean towards the players, it's it goes fairly smoothly. I think like the reason we got away from theater of the mind in the early days is because our GM we've had some GMs who are kind of jerks, and it was always like the ogre attacks the magic user because back in those days you had to work up to being a wizard, uh, and we're like, well, how the wizards in the or the mages in the back, and so it was from that point on like we got a sheet of plexiglass. I drew the lines on it with a T square, and we would just use dice for our combats. D6s were the enemies and D4s were our players. We didn't even have minis at the time.
Yep. I've done that. Yep. Lollies were often the monsters. So the only problem is with monsters as lollies is sometimes they get eaten when they actually die, and sometimes they just get eaten and they didn't actually die. So then you, which monster? Where did that monster go? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, I didn't realize that was being used as a monster, but it's already been eaten.
yeah, yeah. That
Yeah,
is that is a occupational hazard for monsters if you're
yeah,
making them out of candy.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I like Mike. Mike's Sly Flourish is awesome. It's definitely somebody that I've been following for a lot of time. I promote his stuff all the time on my channel.
I think it was Doug that was telling me he would do the candies as well, but he would make like the tougher monsters the flavors that people didn't like. To psychologically make his monsters last longer. So psychological warfare on the players.
Oh, that's awesome, Doug.
There's a pro tip for you folks that are using candy for your monsters.
uh,
Um, so what kind of videos do you enjoy making on your channel?
what do I enjoy making on my channel? There's lots of different things. I'm an eclectic, so which is, of course, the worst thing you can do on YouTube, right? Is to do stuff for
Yeah.
dungeon masters and players. I think the things I've been enjoying the most recently have been a lot of the Dungeon Master guides around the Lost Mine of Phandelver and Dragon of Icespire Peak. The sort of building out the NPCs, because often they don't have a lot of information. People like those, and I
Okay.
don't mind doing them. They just take a long time. I've been enjoying doing the videos on using different bits of mundane adventuring gear. Those have been a lot of fun, and sort of how to use them in clever ways in your game. Sort of like Lost Dungeons and Dragons playing craft, you might say. So I've been doing that. Um, Thankfully, the community knows far more than I do. Otherwise, they wouldn't be very good. And then I've been doing a lot of sort of how to use different spells. So recently, I've done Minor Illusion, which Trent Monk has already done as well. Probably a better video than mine. And then I've also done Mage Hand, and that was a lot of fun to do that video as well. So those are the sorts of things I kind of enjoyed. And then, of course, I think the ones I like the most are when I'm not sitting in this office, because it's like a little tiny office. It's like fishbowl,
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm missing out on the world. So I've been taking my camera to the beach or to a park, sitting under a tree and then just writing my notes and then just turning the camera on and just talking about really small topics. How to relax as a dungeon master, not freak out, things like that. That's the stuff I've been enjoying recently, but that's not what I built the channel on.
What did you build the channel on?
Build the channel on core mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons 5e, because I was running public games for Dungeons and Dragons 4e, then 5e came out, and all the little kids that were playing 4e disappeared, and suddenly I had all these adults asking me questions. I got sick and tired of doing that, and I was like, well, can't I just make a video and I just go and watch the video and I don't have to explain it again? So I made a whole lot of videos on advantage, disadvantage, attack rolls, all that sort of stuff, all really basic, and showed them with miniatures. So that's what I built the channel initially on, was just that sort of stuff.
I feel like there's been quite a few channels that have started that way. Like, I'm tired of explaining this thing. What if I just did it once on a video and then I could just have them watch the video?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So do we have a video on the 10-foot pole?
Yes.
Listen, the 10-foot pole used to be a very big part of the game. Like, you never went into the dungeon without it. And now people are like, why is this even on the equipment list?
Oh, yeah. No. So to be fair, the video I made on that was it's a mixture of useful information and me also taking the piss, which I do a lot. So
nothing wrong with that.
So yeah, the 10-foot pole is definitely there. In fact, it might have been the first one.
It feels like it should be. If it wasn't the first one, it feels like it should have been the first one. Yeah. Just because, like, we came from the same era of gaming, and that was definitely a thing back in the day.
Yep. It still is a thing of today. There are things that Mage Hand can't do. So
yeah.
Still need that pole.
Did you cover Mage Hand arm wrestling?
No, I didn't talk about Mage Hand and arm wrestling. But I'll, if I ever have to update that video, I'll add that on them, Dave. That can
I think they did it in an Acquisitions Inc. game. Like, they had, I don't know if it was like a tavern thing. I seen it a couple years ago, and I just thought it was like hilarious. And they just had them making these like opposed athletics checks with their intelligence to win it, and I thought it was kind of funny and clever at the time.
Oh, I have to say, I liked Acquisitions Incorporated when Chris was doing it.
Yeah,
it was one of my things. So definitely, if I was going to watch any kind of streamed content or people playing Dungeons and Dragons, which usually I do not like watching people play Dungeons and Dragons, it's boring. But Chris's stuff was great. I'm not really into Jeremy's stuff, frankly, but Chris was great.
I don't watch a lot of stream games either. And I don't know, I had found myself on one of the Acquisition Inc. games, and it was also the one where I think they had like a dead beholder that they hollowed out or something and made it into like a machine.
Yes, I remember that one. And that was good.
And it was in that episode that they were talking about the Mage Hand arm wrestling. And I don't know, it just stuck in my lizard brain for some reason.
Well, it's worth remembering. I mean, who would not want to have a hollowed out undead beholder that is mechanized that you can fly around and shoot rays with?
Yeah. Let's see. Dave wants to know when can we go back to cons? Any New Zealand's cons you recommend it? Well, I don't know. We can answer when to go back to cons. But as far as any New Zealand cons that you would recommend, and also any castles. I don't know if there's castles in New Zealand.
New Zealand's a very new country. It's
Yeah,
probably
that's
the
what
new.
I was thinking.
It's in the name, So new and then Zealand because it's like the last land that they named. Okay, and
Yeah.
Z's at the end of the alphabet.
Although we do have a couple castles here, and we're pretty new too. So
No, we don't have any castles. We have a lot of old churches full of nails, old nails that were fired into them by the Maori with muskets. That's about it. And I think the only other thing that even sort of castle related would be trench warfare, because Maori actually designed trench warfare through the Pa, which is like a fortified location. And it was adopted by Europeans for World War One and World War Two. But that's about it. No castles. Sorry. If you want a castle, you have to buy one at one of those like Chinese emporiums. It's probably
yeah.
very, very small.
Oh, he's talking about D&D in a castle. I think so, or not D&D in a castle, but I think there will be D&D in a castle later this year, maybe. It's like everything. Everyone is trying to figure out when they can open up, when what they can open up.
Yeah.
Which is the struggle. You get what's the con scene like in New Zealand?
Non-existent right now. Probably will
Well, right
consist.
now, obviously, in the before times.
In the before times, King's Con. I believe that there were a number of other sort of very small cons, and I really mean like, there maybe 10 people showed up. New Zealand's only got, or had 4.5 million, but then we had a pandemic and then 500,000 people suddenly came back. So it's a very small population for the landmass. So as a result, really, Dungeons and Dragons has been underground for years, and it's only just starting to come out. King's Con was probably the biggest thing that I know of. I was involved in helping run the first one of those cons. And after that, there really hasn't been anything else. We tried one of the old sort of Gary Gygax style Grandmasters tournament in Dungeons and Dragons. I wouldn't suggest doing it a second time. Did it the first time, that was fine, but I would never do it again. But yeah, the con scene is very, very small. It's not like in the States or even other parts of the world where there's probably a lot of tables. I mean, we'd be lucky to get 10 groups in the same room.
Yeah, I mean, here there's so many conventions. Like when we were trying to figure out when to have our convention, like that was one of the toughest things. Is finding a month that doesn't have a convention in it. So it's like here you can't throw a stone at the calendar without hitting the convention.
Yeah, but it's a big country, right? You've got
it is
330 million at least that you know of, and over an entire continent. So
I mean we've got states that are bigger than some countries. Maybe some countries combined, like if you look at like really big states like Texas.
Yeah, absolutely.
The advantage of having a lot of people. So I guess you weren't into conventions very much then, because if you don't have any to go to.
Well, that's not true. So I was probably more involved in conventions because I was a Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League coordinator at one point when they first came out.
Okay.
So I had to deal with the North Island, most of the populations in the North Island, and I wound up doing a lot of the South Island until Andre took over. So yeah, I did that for just over a year, and then I decided I'd had enough and managed to con somebody into taking over from me.
That's how volunteer work usually happens.
But yeah, that was brutal. I would be running like 4 public games a week and desperately trying to find somebody to actually run games so I didn't have to do it myself. I didn't have to go and run a dungeon master, a workshop explaining how to run Dungeons and Dragons 5e. Nobody wanted to touch it when it first came out.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of conventions and a lot of public games that I ran, and I don't do that a lot now because YouTube, as you know, consumes a lot of your time, and if you've got a full-time job, there isn't time.
I think I've heard that rumor before about it
Mm.
consuming a lot of your time.
Yeah, it's just a myth. It's just a myth.
No, no, it definitely can, especially if you're prolific. If you put out a lot of content, then it
Mm.
really does consume a lot of
Yeah,
your time.
yeah.
So, what is it you enjoy the most about doing YouTube?
I think it's there's some really lovely people who, even when you make content that you probably aren't completely happy with, and they say
Uh,
thank you because they couldn't find it anywhere else. I think those are the times when I really sort of realize that YouTube is not the evil thing that I have pretty much stamped my foot down on, just like Facebook. My family were adamant that I needed to get involved in social media, and I rebelled for years.
yeah,
But back in 2016, I decided that it could be used for good, and so I did the Facebook group stuff, and I did the YouTube channel, and I believe I've managed to connect a lot of New Zealand, um, playing, in places that are sort of very out of the way. I mean, I live in Helensville. It's a ghost town. It's not really expanding, it's contracting.
yeah.
So finding people to play with is very, very difficult. So a Facebook group helped do that, and there's about 4,000 in that group now, which is a lot for New Zealand, and that connects people all the time. So I really like the fact that people are playing more and a bit more open about it than they used to be, and yeah, the positive stuff is what pushes me, and I guess the trolls are the ones I'm trying to avoid as much as I can.
Yeah, I mean, every community has trolls. We'll never be 100% without them, but I feel like the D&D and RPG community tends to be a bit better than some of the others.
Mm, yeah.
Um, I mean, most of the experiences on our channel has been pretty good. Um, with very few exceptions. I mean, like I said, there's always going to be trolls you're going to deal with, no matter what. Uh, so Dave says, I'd love to hear your experiences and advice on getting new DMs.
Oh gosh. Bribery, favors.
Have you tried those long poles with the rope that they use to get alligators and crocodiles with?
Right, yeah. Get over here. Yeah, yeah. That's the rope with the spike at the end. Um, Frankly, I found that the easiest way for me to convince people to actually do it was to offer them bribery, which can get expensive, or you have to do them a favor, and then therefore you have to have something that you can do for them that they want. Um, the other thing is actually, training them if you are able to train them.
Mm.
I mean, you must already know this, Dave, but there's nothing more terrifying than running a game for a bunch where everybody's a dungeon master, where they're all primarily dungeon masters, which used to happen to me all the time. Or you sit down and you've decided, okay, I'm going to try and run a dungeon master workshop. And then a whole lot of people show up, and it's quite clear they're experienced dungeon masters. They probably know more than you do. So, but running that sort of thing can really help get people to actually come on board as a dungeon master.
It is a lot easier nowadays than when we started doing it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of examples, I guess it can also be more intimidating in some regards because there's these ideals to try and live up to. But hopefully you're playing with your friends, and like your friends will be a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? Is playing with friends, playing with family, and I think a lot of people are playing with family right now. I really like the idea of Dungeons and Dragons becoming so popular that it's sold beside Monopoly, Snakes and Ladders, and chess. So you just walk into any toy store or variety store, and there it is waiting for you. But
It
it has
is
been.
It's getting closer. I mean, it is finding its way into, some of the box stores. Maybe not the books, but like like the different starter sets and stuff.
You got Walmart in the States, right? And they
Yeah,
have
Walmart and Target is kind of. I think Target's been one where we've been getting stuff in. I don't know. I hardly go to any. I don't really go to any stores anymore.
neither
Um.
do I.
Yeah. But yeah. So like. So I just. Yeah. I just went to the Target website and there was some stuff that came up, like the box sets and stuff.
Yeah, it's
Uh.
not doesn't even appear in our stores. It probably won't for quite some time, I would imagine, if ever. I'm hoping it will. I really am hoping. It's part of the reason why I made the channel is like, there's got to be a day when Dungeons and Dragons is so popular that it's just you just walk into any store and you can find it. I still crossing my fingers.
Yeah. So Dave wants to know if you still do if you're still doing AL, or at least if you were still doing it before the end times, I would say.
No, I don't. I know a lot of people who do, and from time to time, they will try to get me to help find them dungeon masters for their events. But that's before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Uh, and they have pretty much given up on asking me to try and run games at conventions because I usually say no. But yeah, no, I don't really. And I think one of the reasons why I started moving away from Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League is it was a good starting off point when I was involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like a year after that league started, I was talking to all the dungeon masters in New Zealand, and nobody was running Adventurers League anymore. They were all running their own home games in the store, and the
Oh
stores
yeah.
didn't care as long as people came in and they could charge the money, which they were,
Yeah.
because you didn't get space in the store unless you charged money. They can charge money for Magic. If they can't charge money for Dungeons and Dragons is out. Totally understood that, but they weren't playing any Adventurous League. They were running all their own campaigns, and I'm like, well, there's no point really going with that particular style of play if nobody is interested, even though there were more people playing publicly in stores than there ever was before. So, yeah.
Well, I feel like that kind of like fills the same need, and it might just be like the local community as well, right? Like,
Mm.
I guess like the nice thing about Adventures League is that you can go anywhere and kind of plug into it, and you have you have an expectation of what it's going to be,
Mm.
even if you go to some place new that you haven't been to before, and you can just jump in, as opposed to if you just jump into someone's homebrew game and you have no idea what's going on or what to expect. So I mean, I feel like they both have their merits.
Yeah.
I've only played like one or two sessions of an Adventure League games myself, uh, but I still kind of see the value of it.
Yeah, there's value in it. And a lot of players still prefer that style of play because they can take a character from one location to another. And I know the ones that were very, very much excited about the whole Adventurers League loved playing online because they could play in the store, they could play online, they could go back to the store with the same character. And the rules were consistent because all the dungeon masters are given very specific guidelines about how to do things, so there's not a lot of confusion. And usually league coordinators are pretty good at giving advice to dungeon masters in terms of how to resolve and deal with issues.
I know, like, and also too, like, if you're in a place where several games are being run, and if there is an issue, you could there's a good possibility you have someone else you can kind of like talk to, right? Matter of fact, like I was at a convention and like there was like this major issue that came up with something one of the players wanted to do, and it was like I think it was like towards the end of the arc, right? And it was one of their big events, and like the I think one of the players wanted to like side with the villain or something, and like the DM was like, I don't know what to do, and I just happened to be standing there when they're talking about it, and like, well, there's no rules against that. But my younger brother Ryan would poach organized play at their local game shops when he wanted to start like a home group. So he would go to them to look for players to recruit.
Ryan, brilliant idea.
So,
Everybody should be doing that. As a league coordinator, I used to encourage that constantly.
yeah.
And even when I wasn't a league coordinator and I was still doing a lot of coordination around the stores, I was like, if you're running a game in store and there's some people that you guys get along with, you could go and start up your own game and just play in your own living room or somebody else's living room. If you've got a basement that isn't flooded, then use that. Cool.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, and also like organized play tends to be like how I feel like a lot of people view online play, right? Like it's better than not playing at all, but it's not the same as having your own home group, right? It's like the offline version of you're kind of settling for a game and you just want to play. But it is a lot easier nowadays, and I know you said you don't really care for the online play as much. I will say I ran a fan game on Sunday, and it was like we had a player from Belgium, Denmark, Germany, Israel, and Canada, and you just can't do that any other way.
No, you can't. No, absolutely. No, I agree. It's great for bringing people around the world together. But yeah, I guess for me, playing online is a last resort. And even though New Zealand is probably in a better situation than everybody else around the world,
Yeah.
I don't foresee in the immediate future a point where we're going to see the restrictions lifted that much, because we were doing all right, and we've only just gone back into a level 3 lockdown, which pretty much means everybody can't go to work unless you're an essential worker. I can't go to the beach or the park this weekend because you're not allowed to do that. And they're starting to clamp down, so there are legal consequences for screwing with that. So, and that's just New Zealand. So yeah, I don't think that's going to sort of change. I think that there is a place for it. I don't know. I find it hard to really connect with playing online, because I've always, since I've been involved in the community so much in my own country, finding players is not an issue. There have been plenty of people who want to play in my games if I'm dungeon mastering, and I've got a home group that we're pretty tight. We all dungeon master and we all play. And we just do the round robin and we take turns. So for me, it's still going to be in person, but we've got enough people in our group right now that have people who are vulnerable, that they don't want to take chances. So we stick to online for now.
We're getting to the hard hitting questions here in the chat.
Go for it, man. Fire away. I am ready. You can have all
the
of
hats.
it.
The hats, so cool. Can you talk about them?
Okay. I have a video on my hats because I had so many questions about the hats. Okay, so the
nice.
hat, here we go. Part of the reason. Okay.
Was that a short video?
No. This is
it's a disguise. Yeah. My hat of disguise.
I have 3 boxes beside me, huge boxes full of hats. And I would use like a different hat for a lot of my videos. And it all stemmed back when I was dungeon mastering for 4E. And at some point I decided I had to be a sort of a showman or show person. And so I wear a hat for every different sort of NPC that I was playing. And that was in my home groups. And then my mum said, all those hats that you've got, you should use them in your videos. And I was like, well, maybe I should, because it's better than a beanie. And so when I'm cold, it doesn't look like I don't look like garbage quite so much as before. So maybe the hats will work, and
Yeah,
also too,
yeah,
I can hide the balding patch, and people don't necessarily realize that I'm a lot older than I might look. So,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was surprised. You're a little bit older than me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
It's not what's on the outside; it's what's in the inside.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah. I'm 45. I look like I'm 65, but I feel like I'm 105.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Don't get old, folks. It sucks.
Yeah, well, I'm 49, and a few people think that I'm in my 30s, and I'm not.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good problem to have. So, you mentioned that you guys are playing. You play a round the robin style game. So, are you guys running pre-written adventures? You guys like to homebrew or write your own stuff?
Okay, so I think most of us have just been running pre-written stuff, but I'm almost everybody's changing stuff.
Yeah.
I've been running currently. It's my turn, so I'm being the dungeon master this time around. I had a big break for like a year, more than a year and a half, just doing none of it. I just played characters. So we've done Dragon of Ice by a Peak, and yes, I've changed a lot of that. And we're now going through Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I don't know how long that's going to last. My players might get very bored. And they will also crush absolutely everything unless I adjust everything. Nothing in the monster manual is suitable, really. Not with Tasha's. That conversation has already started. God, one
Yeah, yeah.
Tasha's is like a hot point in the
The
party.
the power creep.
It's not just the power creep. I think it's the fact that Tasha's probably should have been called 5.5. Wizards
Yeah.
of the Wizards of the Coast weren't gutsy enough to do that because they knew it would dissect the community, right? And we'd have a whole lot of people sort of like unhappy sticking with 5.5e or shifting to 5.5, just like with version 3 and then 3.5, where the community sort of dissected a bit. And they've done it the rough way. So instead of them looking like the bad guys, everybody else just looks like they're infighting amongst themselves between players and dungeon masters, as the players want it and the dungeon masters are freaking out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird. Like, there's been a shift in the mechanics. Um, one in like now ability scores, just put them wherever you want for your bonuses. And like, I'm like, to me, I'm like, why don't we just get rid of bonuses and just have your stats, right? And we can stop having this discussion because otherwise it just feels like a big circle jerk that isn't going anywhere. Um, you know, and then also like we're seeing a lot more of the mechanics where you're using the proficiency bonus instead of a stat bonus for
Yeah.
things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a brilliant move, Dave. That's the one to go for because it's elegant, it's simple,
Yeah.
and it eliminates a lot of the nonsense that
It,
that can
I,
happen.
I guess the only place where it's kind of like it's a little bit harder if you roll stats, right? But if
Yeah,
you're using point buy or if you're using the standard array, you can just change the point buy in the standard array to be like, okay, everyone can have two 16s if they want to start. Because it's so, but like the arguments are so bizarre to me. And like every argument for moving the stats around, I'm like, you could just say the same thing for just placing your stats in a different spot. It really, what if my half orc is really smart and not strong? Put your worst stat in strength. I don't know, like put your best stat in intelligence. So it's just like it feels like we're doing these mental gymnastics. Where I'm like, we could just totally remove the bonuses here, or do it kind of like the way Pathfinder 2e does it, which I kind of like that because there's a lot of moving pieces that kind of configure things differently, but kind of still gives you a lot of options.
yeah. For somebody who I don't know. My feeling is because I do a lot of videos that sort of help explain the rules or
Yeah.
demonstrate. So I get out maps and miniatures and I will show people how to do stuff. I'm not really a fan of the added complexity. And in fact, I never felt that 5e was stripped back enough. I think Mike Mearls was right that they didn't go far enough, that we really should have got 3 engines, right? Um, Absolute basic, which you could get away playing with your 5-year-old, so that all those parents who are waiting for their kids to get old enough could
Yeah.
actually play with them. And then the standard game, which would probably be played with your 12-year-olds upward, your adults, your teenagers, and so forth. That would be the standard game. And then the advanced game, which would look like any table would be look completely different because you'd have so many different variant rules being used. But we never got that game, unfortunately, and hence what we're seeing is the same progression that Wizards of the Coast always does. They did it with 3, they did it 4, and they're doing it with 5. So I think they've painted themselves into a corner. I don't think it'll stop their books being popular because the
Yeah.
first 2 books they've released sold out and became bestsellers on Amazon in half a day. So
I thought
that's not.
I thought 5e was going to be, they were going to play with the modularity of it a lot more when they first launched it, and they just never did. Like,
No.
we've seen a little bit with, like, some of the books, but even the books they're doing it with they're like fringe books. They're like Theros, they're Ravnica, where they do have these other systems and mechanics that fit on and they fit nicely, but like they're not, they're not, more mainstream to the game. And I thought we were going to get a bit more of that. Like, I thought maybe we might eventually see inspiration get some more wider uses. The hit dice might get some wider uses, but it's like it's stayed very static. Like they're afraid to really kind of do anything that's kind of experimental with the game.
Yeah, they're playing it safe. Kind of feel like that's
Yeah.
the move. And I mean, I can understand that they've got to sell it, right? And you go down the avenue that's going to sell. But yeah, I still feel like if they'd stripped back the game more, there would have been space to tack more things on.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm just going to grab my book because I could literally just think of all the rules that could have just been variant rules in this player's handbook. And that would be initiative. Let's just ditch that. Yeah, that's a variant rule. You can use that if you really want. Just pick a direction. Do you like going clockwise or do you like going anti-clockwise?
Right.
Super simple, right? Surprise. I mean, I don't know what you can do with surprise. I mean, geez, you don't want to eliminate surprise elements in terms of how people play, but there's so many things like reactions aren't a huge problem, but how many people understood bonus actions? The number of times I've had to explain to people bonus actions probably should have just been tied and linked directly to the action.
Or
Like,
triggers, right? You trigger based, be like, you can do this because they're very exception. Like, it's like not very, nothing is a bonus action, right? It's always a feature and ability that you can do as a bonus action, but you can't say, I want to do X with my bonus action because there is no list of actions to do with the bonus action.
Exactly. That's the thing. And the number of times I had to explain to people, no. A bonus action is not like an action. It doesn't mean you get another action like the original action that you were doing before. It's a totally different thing. And that just confused them. I'm like, yeah, we probably would have been better to eliminate it or just call it something else.
Eliminate it, call it something else, or give it things you can do with it that anybody could just do on their turn if they wanted to. Like, you can open the door as a bonus action if you want, or pick this up as a bonus action, but it doesn't have any use unless there's a feature that calls it out. So we could have just got rid of, probably, like you said, the bonus action and be like, you can do this thing once around, and it may have a stipulation, it may not have a stipulation, right? Because we already have that with bonus action anyway. Like, a lot of times it's like, oh, if you take the attack action and you're using 2 light weapons, you can make an offhand attack as a bonus action, right? But it has a bunch of like stipulations that aren't tied to the bonus action itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's
Yeah,
definitely there's probably some wiggle room there. Uh,
absolutely. And what opportunity attacks? I would have made that a variant rule. I just, I mean, I've been involved in martial arts for many years, not so
uh,
much now, but uh, just make that a variant rule. It's just a pain. It's just another thing you got to try and explain to people. You want to
yeah,
use it, great. If you don't worry about it. It would have been nice.
it's true too. Like I guess I've done martial arts off and on, my teens and 20s, and I can't think of a single instance where attacking someone, striking at someone, and then moving away from them caused me to draw, attacks from them. It's actually usually the opposite, right?
Yeah, you move into attack, and that's when they counterattack.
Yes.
Yeah, you're the first person to try to judo throw you is the one that
Yeah.
gets judo throwed back.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a weird thing. I don't really understand it. I think or every time I've ever withdrawn from combat, I've always found I have to move slower, but you don't turn around and just run away,
Yeah.
or it doesn't, and it's just like doesn't
And
really need to be
also,
there.
and also, you only need to get 2 steps away, and then it doesn't matter anymore, right? Because they can't reach you, right? Unless they're gonna hit you with something, or throw something at you or shoot you. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
No.
Which in that case, attacks of opportunities don't apply in D&D anyway. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of a weird mechanic, I guess. Although, I mean, it's not like D&D's that realistic anyway. Nor do I ever try to make it realistic in my own games.
Ooh, Dungeons and Dragons that's realistic. I think that's a frightening thought.
Yeah,
Yeah, look, I mean, I
who
did
would
some
it?
laughing, but I
Yeah.
don't think I would really want to go realistic because that means real swords running around, actually hitting people. It's going to be a lot of blood, carnage. Don't need that.
Having an owlbear bear down on you in real
Yeah,
life.
yeah. We don't want a real LB running around. No. Yeah.
Gods of the Great wants to know which dungeon master would the two of you like to play under?
Me. Which dungeon master would I like to play under? Gonzo, that's a really good question. So, if you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have probably said I would love to play under Chris Perkins because I've always liked Chris Perkins and what he does as a dungeon master. But now, since we've had a bit of time pass, it'd have to be Deborah Ann Wall. That's
Okay.
the person I would love to have as a dungeon master. She's brilliant. What she does feels like real Dungeons and Dragons for me. And not to say that Matt Mercer isn't good at what he does, but it's not for me. Deborah Ann Wall, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, but one of my early DMs, probably my first DM, he passed away at a really young age, and I actually miss playing with him and have a lot of fond memories. But I don't know. I don't really get excited about like quote unquote celebrity GMs, and I just like hanging out with people and playing this game. So I don't have like a lot of expectations going into a game. I'm just there to have fun, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah. I
I don't
mean,
I don't have a cool answer.
that's all right. Hey, man, I mean, I'm never going to get to play with Deborah Ann Wall anyway. So, or Matt Mercer or Chris Perkins. I'm just a normal guy, so that's not gonna that's not gonna happen. People that I actually know that I've always wanted to dungeon master for me was James Dunnings, which nobody will ever know. But what he used to do was just amazing, and I could see why the kids liked him so much.
Yeah.
The way he did things was just fascinating for me. So, but
So
that's in a real world, James Dunnings.
Brian Smith, love your in-depth vids on the baddies from Lost Mines. Any suggestions for how to run a good villain for low levels?
how to run a good villain for low levels. Well, I mean, see, I don't think that there's like any sort of particular thing that you do. There's not like one thing that you do. I would say just figure out what their motivation is. This is the same thing everybody says. I mean, you can go on YouTube and somebody's going to say the same thing over and over and over again. I think the idea is to find a villain that your players are terrified of. And that's my view, is find somebody that they are terrified of and present them early on. I'm a fan of Curse of Strahd, because you get to see the main villain early on, and he keeps popping up right throughout the adventure, till eventually I would imagine the player's characters are going to defeat him, because that's sort of the progression. They get more powerful, but he does not. So yeah.
Yeah, thinking about the motivation, making it personal.
Yeah.
It's like the non-combat stuff, right? That's the stuff that makes really good low-level villains. Like, and really, it could be like a noble, right, or an aristocrat, right? They're easy to physically defeat, but they might wield a lot of power in certain circumstances, and you can't just murder them, right? Or they're hard to get to just murder them. You know, so that it makes you have to think as a player and combat them in different ways.
Yeah.
So Kaywood Publishing wants to know: do you find Mad Mage Waterdeep has a clear direction?
A clear direction. Does any Wizards of the Coast adventure have a clear direction? I mean, the Lost Mine of Fandalba probably does a better job than most of them. But if I were to say, I want to run a pre-made adventure, I'm not probably going to go to Wizards of the Coast. I would say Dungeon of the Mad Mage it's got a lot of stuff there, so there's not too much work to do. But it's so long, and it's such a handful. Yeah, there's nothing really that clear about it. There's so many different factions going on. I mean, my players wanted lots of different villains, so that should hopefully work out for me, but I don't think it's necessarily going to work out for somebody else. Yeah.
So, yeah, they're very sandboxy. Like, other things I've looked at, and like we hardly ever do, pre-written stuff. I mean, you kidding me? I've been, I guess we're in the 7th year of 5e, and it just this year I've played through my first pre-written adventures. We did the Frozen Sick, and then we did. Now we're playing Curse of Strahd, and usually our home stuff is homebrew, and we make things up. I mean, folks that come here and listen to these know, I probably say some of the same stuff over and over again. But like, to me, running a pre-written adventure just seems like a lot more work. Like, I feel like you have to go through and read it, and then, like you say, you have to customize it and fix it. And at that point, I just rather run my own stuff and run it around whatever the players are doing, and it requires less work on my part.
Yeah. Well, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I found that I have to modify. I mean, none of the monsters I can run straight from the monster manual.
Yeah.
And but then I never really could do that initially anyway, because I mean, it was fine with beginners, because you don't want to be adjusting monsters with beginners. They don't know what the heck they're going to be dealing with. But as the players start to learn what monsters can do from the monster manual, they really are just pretty tame. And I'm actually in the monster manual. I was one of the was just part of the beta test. I was part of the alpha play test. I got roped into it by one of my mates, and so I was giving feedback on it. And I think the feedback I gave was, well, level 5, 6, and they seem to be able to crush everything. He didn't give us a challenge rating. I don't know what, how are they supposed to be able to destroy a rock? Is that supposed to be? I mean, I don't know. So yeah, I think you really do have to adjust a lot of the stuff with the monster manual. And Wizards of the Coast, I don't know, what is it about Chris? He's wanting to do epic adventures, right? And that's,
Yeah.
he's said that many times. And I don't think that's what people necessarily want. I keep talking to people and they say in my community, well, we want stuff that's shorter that we can sort of transpose and just use a small chunk of it. Or if it's, small enough, we can just use that adventure and then do our own stuff and maybe add something else later on. Mix and match.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they've been getting some of that, like, um, with Salt Marsh and Yawning Portal and Candlekeep, mysteries, where it's an anthology. It's a bunch of adventures. Um, Instead of these like big adventures, like we've been playing Curse of Strahd now as a weekly game for um for months. I mean, we started that group back in February of last year. Played through the Frozen Sick which was only like maybe 3 or 4 sessions tops. And since then it's been Curse of Strahd. Like, you know, you can't play through these adventures, before they release the next one. For most people.
Well, we used to have that problem in Adventurers League, is that they, have a storyline come out, and everybody would want to play through that storyline, but we couldn't finish it before the next storyline came out. It was like, and they would release 2 storylines a year. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, what are we supposed to do now? Well, just run that and the other one. But Curse of Strahd took my group a year and a half, Dave. So if your group is playing every week for, say, 2 hours, you can probably expect it's going to take a long time to get through that.
And also, right, they're very sandboxy adventures, and if you have a group that kind of meanders a lot, and then also like our DM added content. Like there's a supplement on the DMs Guild that takes the whole book aspect of it that gets introduced within the campaign and turns them into like things that you can interact with, and instead of just getting the information. So we've done quite a few sessions of that as well. Mm. So I think we might be finally getting to the point where we want to try and go to the castle. Okay. But I think we're 7th level. We're about to level almost 8th level, somewhere around there. Maybe we just leveled up.
Well, I think my group, we're pretty sure that they could probably take Strahd at level 5 if they had all the items that they thought they were supposed to collect, and they probably could, because challenge rating is kind of doesn't.
Oh really work. I mean, I try not to be as critical as I've been in the past, but the challenge rating system, I find it to be a bit wonky, and I'm kind of notorious for making encounters that are beyond deadly by the numbers, but they're really not. Like, I did an encounter with like 40 zombies or skeletons in a graveyard, a nightmare, and a death knight, right? And they were like, I don't know what level they were, 10th, around there. And it, on paper, there was it was like so beyond challenging, because I didn't really count the zombies. I just said, how many minis do we have, and throw them on the table. And but the cleric is like just every round dusting zombies, right? Oh, yeah. So, so they got to feel cool. And also my rangers in the party just like decimated the Death Knight super fast. So like the combat lasted in like I don't know, it's like 3 rounds, and and we're just like, well, how challenging is this encounter? And I was like,
nothing. Yeah. So see, I mean, that sounds bad, but I threw 400 zombies at a group, because I figure try everything at least once or twice, and if it's proves to be a bad idea, then don't do it again. So, and Wizards of the Coast kept going on about low-level monsters are still challenging at a high level. And this group, I think there were 7 players. They were level 6. 2 of the players just stood in the midst of these things, killed about 2 or 3 zombies every single round. And because their armor class was so high and because zombies do so little damage, they just stood there and they said, "Sweet Fred, it's all right. We might take us a little while, but we're going to kill them all." And everybody else just jumped on a building or climbed a tree and shot them to death. So that was the end of that. Or just blew them up with fireballs and various other magic. So yes, 400 zombies, party of 7 level 6 characters. They'll be fine.
I know. I had a forest encounter where I had the players being chased by chokers, and I was just like, how many small minis you got there, Ted? And I just like put them up, but like then like the character just cast blade barrier and like chainsawed them, right? And so it didn't even matter. Like, I don't know, 40, 60 of them, like ridiculous numbers. There's just like choker parts were flying everywhere. When they finally got to go. I did kill they had captured this stone chariot that was pulled by a pair of bullets. And I did blender their bullets, but they were pretty much fine.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is with challenge rating, right, is that it's a mathematical equation, and Dungeons and Dragons is, I mean, there's maths involved, but you can't equate for everything in a formula to try to, figure out based on the players and the different things that they can do and how it all combines. It would be unreasonable to expect Wizards of the Coast, I think, to come up with a challenge rating system that worked, because it never worked in the past. Why is it going to work now?
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at counter and go, Now it breaks down the other way occasionally as well, depending on your players, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like, they can handle a couple dozen Sturges. The bard's going to cast sleep and put most of them to sleep the first round. Then the bard whips out their longsword, and I'll go, this has just got a lot harder. Or we were putting together an adventure that or encounters that we give to our Patreons, and our content director Doug is like, well, the challenge rating is this by the numbers, and I looked at it and I go, yeah, but you know what? They're high, if they're 5th level, or no, I think it was for 4th level, so they weren't 5th level yet. I was like, AOEs are going to decimate these monsters pretty quick. So I don't think it actually is challenging for that, but but by the numbers, we kind of have to look at that when we're putting out stuff as a publisher to be in line with what Wizards does. Even like if you look at the monsters that they put together and the monster manual and compare those challenge ratings to the challenge ratings to the monster books that came afterwards, you'll see that the monsters that came afterwards are much tougher.
Yeah. Well, that's because, so when I was part of the alpha playtest and they gave us the material, they first gave us the stat block. We didn't get a picture. We didn't get any lore. We just got a stat block. There was no challenge rating listed on it, just a monster and a stat block. That's it. And then we'd run those, and then they gave us the lore after, which was helpful because it helped sort of tie the monster into the story and give us an idea of, how it might sort of operate. But we never got the challenge ratings. And the schedule around testing stuff was like, we're going to do from A through to D. You have 2 weeks to test those monsters. There was a lot of people testing the stuff, I'm sure, but it still felt like a very short period of time to be able to get it all done. And because they've got to get the book out, right? So that's why I think a lot of the monsters from the monster manual feel not as powerful as compared to what they have done, because they know over time that then they needed to sort of lift it up, make it a bit more.
They've gotten a lot more feedback since those monsters came out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, hey folks, as usual, in the description, you can find links to go check out how to D&D. Please do. I want to thank you for coming on, Fred. We're just past the hour mark, and I know it is super early there for you, so I do appreciate you making the time for us and coming to hang out. Final thoughts before we go?
Yeah, keep rolling those 20s.
There you go.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. So until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.